I'm sorry. I apologize. You all caught me. I was just about to eat something. My. Uh, Welcome to Run Tell That, and this is another special Run Tell That. Cause we're dealing with family, food, and the time. So again, some of y'all saw some of this before, but we got to come back to it because again, it's that atmosphere. As we told y'all, we had the time period that people gathered together as family, that eat turkey and all this hams, all the other stuff like that, veggie dishes, all that. This is that time period, and we are doing that right now. This is a great time period for us, and so this is what's going on. We're back to celebrate. Some call it Yiyame, again, celebration for family, and we're gonna have that fair. We're gonna have that food. But then also, we got some other people now. You celebrate a time period, December 25th. You celebrate that. You got Hanukkah. And even times that, that Ramadan has been during this time period. But then also, you got December 26th through the 1st. You got Kwanzaa. And then again, December 31st, some watch night service. But then also, New Year's Eve. But then on that next day, bam, Haitian Independence Day, January 1st. Oh, some of y'all saying, what about New Year's? Yes, New Year's. But then Kwanzaa, New Year's, Haitian Independence Day, Watch Night, then Christmas, but then also a special holiday called John Canoe. We're going to be getting into that. But we are here to talk about some of the fairs, some of the food that give us, again, that festive time period, that festive feeling. And so y'all caught me with some of that Carolina Gold. That's us, again, you can talk about in other places what you're going to, but that Carolina Gold, we love the taste of that here in this part of the country, and you got it around the entire country. So we're going to get into it. We're going to get right back into it. We're about to do this right now. We're going to do it again. We're going to give it to you again.
Behind beloved desserts and their connection to Northern abolitionists, Thanksgiving, and the holiday season as a whole. See, Thanksgiving pumpkin pie was once the hotly contested battleground in America's cultural war. In the 1800s, pumpkins and sweet potatoes became a totem in the fight to abolish slavery in America. The introduction of sweet potatoes to Western Africa in the 16th century was a very slow process. Initially, root vegetables such as cassava and yams were preferred over sweet potatoes. However, after the transatlantic slave trade, which helped spread the popularity of sweet potatoes in Europe and the Americas, it was only then that the African American community started using sweet potatoes because of their convenience. Western Africa is a yam-based culture. While sweet potatoes are not the same thing as a tropical yam, enslaved people embraced them as a substitute in the absence of true yams. Before they had sweet potato pie, they had something called sweet potato pound, which is a corruption of the Native American word for baked bread. Enslaved people were eating roasted sweet potatoes cooked in the embers of fire and started spicing and mashing up sweet potatoes. As they got access to cooking technology and equipment like ovens, they started adding pie fillings, and the sweet potato pie was born. After slavery was abolished, African Americans began to migrate away from the southern United States in what was referred to as the Great Migration. During this time period, many African Americans brought along one of their favorite dishes, sweet potato pie, and it was introduced to other regions of the country. During the same time period, during the early 19th century, eating pumpkins and celebrating Thanksgiving became synonymous with identity politics. Abolitionist and pumpkin enthusiast and home economics pioneer Sarah Joseph Hale was the driving force behind the pro-Thanksgiving campaign. Hale campaigned for state-level Thanksgiving celebrations and was largely successful in the early 1800s, helping spur declarations for Thanksgiving in 29 states by 1850. But as the fight over slavery intensified and the Civil War loomed, people in the southern states began to reject what they saw as Northern cultural aggressions. The state of Virginia in particular wanted no part of Thanksgiving. In a letter to Hale, Virginia Governor Henry Wise, who was strongly pro-slavery, expressed his disapproval of New England abolitionist goals by referring to the theatrical national claptrap of Thanksgiving, which he said was used to encourage ministers to preach Christianity politics. Still, in 1863, Abraham Lincoln would declare the last Thursday in November as the National Day of Thanksgiving. Lincoln hoped that this holiday would serve in some way to heal the wounds of the nation and restore it. And since then, every president has kept that tradition alive. Still, some members of the Confederacy were unhappy with the Thanksgiving celebration and perceived it as a political move. They were especially unhappy with what they saw as a New Englander attempting to dictate how they should live. So for many years after the Civil War, Southerners refused to celebrate Thanksgiving and refused to eat pumpkin pie. It was not until after Reconstruction that Southern states began to accept Thanksgiving, and it wasn't until 1941 that Thanksgiving holiday was officially recognized into federal law. So, in the absence of pumpkin pie, Southerners started cooking sweet potato pie made by formerly enslaved people. Pumpkin pie, despite its popularity, remained a Yankee food for many generations. It didn't gain widespread
I was caught up. I got some of this peach cobbler. I apologize. This peach cobbler from Kim's Cafe, 714 MLK Junior Boulevard. Peach cobbler. Peach dishes. Some people it peaches are rotten. Guess what? African people, what we realize, we make dishes out of them. We make peach cobbler. Somebody else says rotten, but we know how to make it something good. And that's a part of our story. That's a part of our history. That's about to choke. Some of our culinary traditions. And so guess what? That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with culinary traditions that are part of the fabric of our families, a part of our festive time periods. Because again, we make it much more expansive than what the tradition has been. With regard to people just saying about the giving of gifts, guess what? There's more to it. It's about families coming together. And there's going to be a story that we're going to be dealing with later on. But we want to give some of you some of the stories, because some of y'all heard it before with regards to what we did before doing in November. But we said we got November, December, and January, and that we need to understand why food is important to us, and especially when we come together as family. And so this next one, this is something true that gets a little controversial for some people, but we got someone by the name of Keisha Gibson Carter. Her family swears that she makes the best in the entire country. Now, that's not to say that I eat it. I don't eat it, and many of you don't eat it. But again, guess what? And don't think that this is something that comes just out of captivity. It was done on the continent. It's done in China also. People fix it right there. So again, but we're throwing it out there. And some of y'all might try to shy away from that. But we tell you all share, because that's why it's important to us. And we got this next one right here.
First documented in English language around the year 1400. It was spelled Chitterlings. Linguist Paul Anthony Jones pointed out that during the late 1500s, chitterlings referred to a fancy type of neck ruffle. It's possible that the name came about from their frilly edges resembled the internal folds of an animal's intestines. The earliest origins of chitterlings trace back to the Middle Ages in Europe, particularly in the United Kingdom and France, where they formed an integral part of impoverished peasants' dietary repertoire. During this period, less desirable parts of the pig, including the intestines, were left for the consumption of the poorer classes, while the upper classes ate their choice of meat. This was a matter of necessity, as the idea of waste was not a concept that could be entertained much during the Middle Ages. During that same time period, cooking chitlins was a labor-intensive task involving washing, boiling, often frying before they could be consumed. They were often boiled with onions and covered in a sauce made from a broth. In 1743, the British cookbook entitled The Lady's Companion, or The Infallible Guide to the Fair Sex, included a recipe for calf chitterlings. This dish was essentially a type of sausage that contained bacon, and oval, which is a variety of internal organs of an animal, all inside the casing of a calf intestine. The reason was given for using calf intestines instead of the usual pig intestines was because the recipe was meant for the summer when pigs were not commonly slaughtered. This recipe was later shared by Arthur Hannah Glass in the famous 1784 cookbook, The Art of Cookery. Meanwhile, in Asia, chitterlings were adopted into local cuisine with a variety of preparation methods and seasoning, and in keeping in regional culinary standards. In China, for instance, chitlins had been cooked for over 1,000 years, and they were often used in stews, braises, and in stir fries. While chitterlings were familiar to some cultures in Africa, they were primarily introduced to the diets of enslaved Africans in the Americas during their enslavement. The plantation owners would often slaughter pigs for their meat, reserving the premium cuts for themselves. The leftover parts of the pig, feet, the head, the heart, the neck bones, and the intestines were often given to the enslaved. Hence, chitterlings or chitlins became a regular feature on the tables of the enslaved. Unlike other soul foods that had a common lineage in Southern cuisine, chitlins remained strong ties to their African heritage. This connection stemmed from the West African tradition of eating all edible parts of plants and animals. These foods helped maintain the enslaved survival in the United States, and they were forced to rely heavily on chitlins because they were both cheap and readily available. To make the most out of less desirable parts, the enslaved will often slow cook or boil their chitlins, usually adding inexpensive vegetables. This was an effective way to get many nutrients out of the meat as possible. Even though their diet was mainly filled with carbohydrates, this process shows how enslaved people were resourceful in making the most out of a tough situation and provides their resilience and ability to create nutritious meals out of leftovers. The preparation of chitlins would then evolve into an art form. The meticulous task of cleaning, preparing, and cooking. The cooking method was often slow and designed to tenderize the tough meat and sought to enhance the flavor with already available seasonings such as onions, garlic, chili, and vinegar. These cooking methodologies witnessed an evolution over time was based on the ingredients that they had on hand or regional leanings, displaying the creativity and adaptability of enslaved Africans in the face of stark adversity. In the post-emancipation era, popularity of chitlins continued despite segregation laws, underscoring their cultural significance. Many restaurants serve chitlins as a part of their range of dishes, now referred to as soul food. Chitlins became a staple in many African American homes and often had a special place at a table during holiday periods such as Christmas or New Year's. This is not simply because it was delicious, but it's also because it carried a powerful message of hope, good luck, and wealth for the coming year. Chitlins was not only about food, but about family unity, which made them a favorite dishes at family reunions and community events. These occasions were a great way for older family members to show the younger ones how to prepare chitlins, thereby ensuring the tradition continues. Particularly during the Civil Rights era, chitlins found themselves at the heart of African American social gatherings, family celebrations, and festivals. Chitlins was so closely linked to Black culture that there was once an informal collection of entertainment venues mostly attended by Black audiences called the Chitlin Circuit. Today, young people have a wide variety of food available and may not feel as closely linked to chitlins. Some may view it as a symbol of poverty and wish to separate themselves from this aspect of their diet. Chitlins also would become associated with slave food. This happens because a person's wealth and social status was determined by the part of the pig which they consumed. Initially, the enslaved and later poor individuals often ate pig's feet, the stomach, or the chitlins because they were cheaper, but they also were physically lower on the pig. People with more means, on the other hand, generally ate the pricier portions of meat like the back or upper leg of the pig. And this is where the expression high on the hog comes from, because it literally meant rich people eating physically higher portions of the hog. Moreover, people were now paying attention to that diet and how that affect their health. Chitlins were known for their high caloric and cholesterol content and have been linked to health problems such as obesity and heart disease. These problems were prevalent in the African American community, leading many to steer clear of traditional dish like chitlins, comparing them to unhealthy foods and sugary drinks. Also, preparing chitlins is a extremely time-consuming process and not conducive to the quick-paced lifestyle that we now live. Tasks like cleaning intestines can take hours and is challenging for families, especially working ones. Young people prefer a faster and more ready-to-eat meals. Chitlins also stir up discussions about identity and history. They are so deeply rooted in African American culture. Some view them as a sign of resilience and a way to stand up for social justice, while others view them as a reminder of the stark reality of slavery. While some people have distanced themselves from chitlins, others are exploring new ways to prepare and enjoy them. Chefs are inventing healthier recipes like using leaner pork parts or adding more vegetables and spices. There are even vegetarian versions of chitlins that are being developed using mushrooms or burdock root. In popular culture, chitlins often used as a nostalgic comfort food. For example, in the book of Color Purple, they use it as a symbol of the family's bonds. Also, Chef Carla Hall once wrote in her book about her experiences and the importance of chitlins in her family, especially during the holidays. She emphasizes their cultural significance and the family bonds that cooking chitlins help create. Chitlins are not just a food. They represent African American heritage and family. They are an example of the creativity despite hardships and show people how Black people found a way to make tasty meals out of the literal worst part of the pig. Chitlins are a testament to African American tradition, representing survival, creativity, and community. Have you ever wondered why African Americans don't eat pumpkin pie? Every year, American enjoys their traditional.
We are back. We are back. And again, we're celebrating us. We're celebrating family. We're celebrating fair. We're celebrating food. And what we're going to do right now, this is Ron Tell that we're going to go to a break. And we'll then come right back and talk some more about this and share some more. Because we got something coming up on December 25th. That is a special day for many of us. And so, but again, this is Ron Tell that we say share, share, share.
Need your garments cleaned with care and with a professional touch? Then bring them to One Price Cleaners in Garden City at the Old Farmers Market on Highway 80. Service you can count on.
Oh, I mean my friend, your Savannah homeboy, Clarence Thomas, made sure that I don't go to prison.
So Julius is in there talking to Trump. Ooh, I'm telling.
So y'all got me drinking some of the sour. Y'all caught me drinking some of the sour. The Bishop, the Zobo, the Sobo. Some call it sorrel. Some call it roselle. Others call it hibiscus. And so what occurred in one of the videos, you heard them go and talk about that for African people, we use it all, of the plants and also the animals, that again, that can provide us with nutrition. That's our tradition. And so for some of y'all know, y'all heard me discuss this right here, that We don't use the hibiscus rice. That sorrel, that rosette. You just make a drink out of it, but you can also eat the leaves. That's a part of our tradition. Again, it helps with regards to our nutrition, our health, and that's physically, mentally, and some even going to say with regard to sexually, it helps with regard to that. So again, tradition. But again, get back to what I'm supposed to be saying to y'all. Support our supporters. That is One Price Cleaners, located in the Farmers Market in Garden City on Highway 80, and Kim's Cafe at 714 MLK Jr. Boulevard, and Chef Food and Gas. Don't ride by, stop by. And Davis Johnson Bozeman Law Firm, the offices in Savannah, Atlanta, and Statesboro. So we are back. This is Runtel that we say share, share, share. And what we're talking about again, the food, the fare, the fun, the family. Because that's what happened during this time period. Because we saw what happened in November. Because we see us coming together. And again, the harvest time, all that coming into play. And then we harvest our family. We harvest that family love. We bring it together. And a part of the nutrients going into the soil of us as a family is the food. Again, the festivities, all a part of it. And so, again, we're going to deal with some more of the food. And that's what we're going to be getting into with y'all again. But that hibiscus, that red punch, during Juneteenth, that's what the red punch is supposed to be. It is supposed to be hibiscus. Yes. And guess what? Some people think that hibiscus is something tied to the Caribbean, not knowing that it goes right back home to Africa. Africa Vive. And some more Africa Vive right here.
Have you ever wondered why black-eyed peas are considered lucky, or why we eat black-eyed peas at all? Well, today we're going to talk about the history of African Americans and black-eyed peas. Domesticated in Western Africa around 3000 BC, the birthplace of this legume known as the black-eyed pea. The lush valleys and rural villages near the Lake Chad Basin in what is now Nigeria and northern Cameroon, these early Western African civilizations, black-eyed peas was more than a crop. It was a crucial part of daily life and culture, revered and cherished by the people who cultivated it. Black-eyed peas is a shaling bean, a subspecies of the cowpea. It's a type of bean enclosed in a long green pod. And despite the harsh environmental conditions where it grew, black-eyed peas flourished. It became a staple of their diet and provided them with much-needed nourishment as it began to spread across the globe. During communal feasts, traditional ceremonies, black-eyed peas took center stage. Lively celebrations with family and friends gathered around, the air rich with the aroma of akara, which is a savory fritter made from black-eyed peas. Each bite is a testament to a shared heritage. This simple legume was woven into the very fabric of life. While in Western Africa, black-eyed peas don't have this folkloric connection to money, were often associated with good luck. One belief held the distinction that of the pea could ward off the evil eye, a malevolent spell cast by one's enemies. They were also eaten during special occasions. Take Good Friday, for instance. Families in parts of Western Africa would traditionally enjoy a creamy cowpea coconut custard dish called a frijan. And some Western African religions, black-eyed peas are prepared as offerings to deities on ceremonial days because it's believed to be their favorite food. However, this story takes a dark turn. During the transatlantic slave trade, Africans were torn from their homeland. Enslaved Africans were forced onto ships, but they held on to their cultural roots as tightly as they could. Among those roots was the black-eyed pea. Upon arriving in plantations in the American South, the enslaved Africans planted the pea in unfamiliar soil, seeking a connection to their lost heritage. Those peas, much like the enslaved Africans, were resilient. They flourished in rugged conditions and became a crucial part of their diet. Boiled, mashed, and tossed in stews, black-eyed peas provided essential nutrients that helped them sustain through their grueling labor. Soon, black-eyed peas became a significant part of Southern culture. Embraced by enslaved people, it was eventually adopted by their white enslavers. It became known as the poor man's meat due to its nutritious qualities. The resilience of these little legumes symbolized the endurance and adaptability of the people who depended on them. But this doesn't explain how black-eyed peas came to be associated with New Year's Day. The tradition of eating black-eyed peas on New Year's Day is steeped in history and some cultural lore. It all began ironically in Western Europe, where New Year's Day customs included a practice known as first footing. According to Ralph Whitlock's book, The Search for Lost Gods, A Guide to British Folklore, the first person to step within the threshold of a home on New Year's Day morning needed to be dark-haired, which is believed to bring good luck. Often the person would bring gifts of coal and bread, which symbolized the wish for the house to be abundant in fuel and food throughout the coming year. People believed that whatever happened on the first day, good or bad, would set the tone for the rest of the year. Over time, the tradition evolved, especially in the American South. Instead of requiring a dark-haired stranger to knock on the door, people began to place black-eyed peas on their table. Enslaved Africans blended their own cultural beliefs with those of European settlers, influencing this change because black-eyed peas was already considered lucky in Western Africa. But there's also a story behind how black-eyed peas began to symbolize luck in the southern United States, and it's linked to the Civil War. Specifically, Sherman's March to the Sea in 1864. Major William Tecumseh Sherman led a brutal campaign from Atlanta to Savannah, determined to cripple the Confederate war effort. His troops left a path of destruction, stripping households of food supplies and livestock. As Southern families emerged from hiding, they faced the grim reality of starvation. In this despair, a particular form of salvation emerged. Union troops, deeming black-eyed peas only fit for livestock, left silos of them behind. This forgotten pea provided crucial nourishment for numerous Southerners, providing a vital food source in the aftermath of Sherman's scorched earth strategy. This fortunate discovery led to a new tradition, along with that of enslaved Africans, of eating black-eyed peas on New Year in the hopes of garnering good luck for the coming year. After the Civil War, freed African Americans faced the monumental task of rebuilding their lives. Despite oppression, they found strength in the shared culinary practices, with black-eyed peas continuing to play a central role. Beyond the historical context, black-eyed peas also hold a special place in culinary traditions because they resemble coins. These peas were believed to bring monetary prosperity when consumed during New Year's celebrations. This belief, rooted in African customs, was passed down through generations and blended with Southern culinary practices. The legacy of these traditions continues in dishes like Hoppin' John, which typically features black-eyed peas cooked with rice, pork, and spices. This is a dish that melds African cooking techniques along with Southern ingredients, symbolizing a blend of old and new worlds and reminding us of perseverance of those who came before us. Later, during the Great Migration, when millions of African Americans moved from the South to urban areas in the North, they once again took those culinary traditions with them. The black-eyed pea found its way into kitchens, Harlem, Chicago, and Detroit, symbolizing a peaceful home and a source of comfort in this unfamiliar environment. In contemporary times, black-eyed peas are celebrated not just for their traditional role, but for their nutritional value. They have become a favorite ingredient in various dishes, from soul food to modern culinary experiments, illustrating the adaptability and enduring relevance of the humble legume. Today, preparing a pot of black-eyed peas is an act of cultural preservation and celebration. It connects generations. It allows people to recall the past and create new memories, whether it enjoyed during family gatherings, community events, or quiet dinners. The humble black-eyed pea continues to tell a story of resilience, perseverance, and a shared heritage.
Now, I know what some of y'all are probably saying. I know some of y'all gonna probably say for Hoppin' Johns that you don't use black-eyed peas. So what I tell folks, African people will use what's in their environments to make the dishes that still come from Africa. That's a part of what we call American cuisine. So again, some of y'all, some people get a little persnickety about that. They get a little touchy about Hoppin' Johns, how you make Hoppin' John. Some people gonna say it's gonna be red peas. You're gonna say the red peas. That's what they're gonna say. The red peas, the field peas. That's what they're gonna say. They're gonna say the Sea Island peas here. That's how you make Hoppin' Johns. That's what. So, but I tell folks, listen here. Folks use black eyed peas also for Hoppin' John. So guess what? And y'all saw Hoppin' John also goes directly back to Africa. So some of this right here, what we're talking about, this is African tradition right here. One of the best parts of African history is tied to food. Tied to food. The food that we eat, that we call American cuisine, is African cuisine. And I tell people this often. I say, and we get caught up in trying to give credit to Popeyes and Colonel Sanders, when in actuality, it's our tradition, it's our foodways. So African people, when you are here in the Americas, so now let me go and share this with you. I said in the Americas. I say, so it don't matter if you're in South America, Central America, Mexico, U.S. or Canada, understand the foods that sometimes they try to attribute to Canada, the United States, Mexico, Central American nations, to South American nations, they try to attribute just like that stuff came out of that experience, the European experience, or the or they call it, the European Latin experience and all the other stuff like that, Spanish experience. Guess what? It goes right back to Africa. Because again, they brought the people over here, and again, that's a part of that exchange that they talk about. We bring the stuff with us, and so guess what? So now the food that we eat, other people claim it for somebody else, but guess what? It's our food, it's our story, and we need to embrace that. And so that's why this time period is about family. So again, black eyed peas, people want to eat this African dish around the entire United States. Around the entire United States, people going to eat this African dish called Hoppin' Johns. So now let y'all know that my brother, chef, artist, BJ Dennis, researcher also, he was like, when they say some of those names like Hoppin' Johns, and so I throw it out there. Any of y'all familiar with Lazy Susan? Oh, excuse me, Limpin' Susan. So you had Hoppin' Johns, but his wife was called Limpin' Susan. And so Hoppin' Johns is peas and rice. Limpin' Susan is okra and rice. But now guess what? Some of y'all out there saying, wait a minute, no, we got some other names we call that perlo or pilo. Again, our tradition, that what we have it, vegetable perlo, meat perlo, chicken perlo, seafood perlo, pork perlo. So again, that's what we're going to do. We are now putting, because again, it's those dishes, those meats or vegetables with that rice. So yeah, when I say that type of rice, it's the rice you grow here in Georgia or in Carolina or in Florida or in North Carolina. So again, the rice dishes are tied to us. And so I tell people, guess what? The genetic memory comes into play with us, with some of us when we go to Chinese American restaurants, not realizing that when we go to these restaurants, and again, I should say Asian restaurants, that when you all now want this certain type of rice, you want this meat with this rice or that seafood with that rice, guess what? Not even understanding that it's all African. It's still your African memory with you. When some of us say we have no ties to Africa, yeah, Africa is still with you. And so again, the food that we're eating tied to Africa, and we are here. And so this is what we're going to be dealing with right now. We're going to be dealing with some more of the foodways tied to our tradition, coming directly from Africa.
That's popular around the globe for their taste and their high concentration of vitamins A, C, and K. Collard greens are some of the oldest members of the cabbage family, also known as the tree cabbage. Originating in the eastern Mediterranean, the name collard is derived from colewort, which means the cabbage plant. Despite their name, collard greens do not grow tight heads like cabbages. Indeed, they are part of the cabbage family, but they're more closely similar to kale. Collard greens were made popular in Europe by the Greeks and the Romans. Ancient Greeks grew kale and collard greens together and made little distinction between the two. Historians are unsure on whether or not Romans discovered greens through the Greeks or if they started growing them independently. When the Romans went on their conquest of what is now the United Kingdom, they introduced collard greens to European diets around the 4th century BC. Their introduction to Africa, however, comes long before transatlantic slave trade and became a dominant part of African people's diets, even to this day. Many countries in Africa, especially those in Eastern Africa, love the green leafy vegetable, which is known as sukuma wiki. Preparing the collard greens often involves boiling or steaming, as they are served as accompaniments to either meat or fish. They can also be supportive ingredients in soups and stews or with other vegetables. After becoming a staple of European diets, collard greens were brought to the Americas by European settlers in the 17th century. This happened during a period known as the Columbian Exchange, which is an historical event involving the transfer of various goods, animals, plants, people, and even diseases between Europe, West Africa, and the Americas. Collard greens were loved in the southern part of the United States because other plants struggled to grow during cold winter months. In fact, collard greens were so resilient that they could survive through all seasons, but they generally thrive from around January to April. When enslaved Africans were brought here to the United States, they didn't leave their culinary traditions behind. They brought along their traditions and the practices of cooking collard greens. While their oppressors may have consumed select foods, enslaved people were left with the leftovers, which included the harder stems of the collard greens. Despite these tough circumstances, the enslaved Africans showcased their creativity by transforming simple collard greens into flavorful meals. The classic recipe included simmering collard greens slowly in a pot of water until they became tender with either salt pork, ham hocks, or turkey necks to balance out the tough texture and the bitter taste of the greens. Food historian Michael Twitty would state that many culinary historians agree that the green craze in the South is supported by the spring greens among Celtic and Germanic Southerners, but it was really spearheaded by people of African descent. The greens were then served with homemade cornbread, and the practice involved dipping the bread into the broth that remained in the pot, fondly known as the pot liquor. The liquor is the leftover soup at the bottom of the pot that was created from the extended cooking process of leafy greens or beans. After the greens have been cooked thoroughly, the nutrients would often seep to the bottom of the pot. This is basically the liquor that is left in the bottom of the pot. According to Southern wisdom, the pot liquor will cure what ails you, and if nothing ails you, it will at least clean you out. The connection between collard greens and African Americans is deeply rooted in historical and the cultural experience. The labor-intensive process of cooking collard greens involves cleaning, chopping, and slow simmering, often for hours, with ham hocks or smoked turkey to amplify the flavor, reflects the strenuous hardships of African Americans and how they had to endure them throughout their history. This food preparation ritual is passed down through generations and is intertwined with stories of both struggle and success. Thus, the tradition of cooking and consuming collard greens has evolved beyond a cultural staple. Today stands as a symbol of both wealth and prosperity. This is especially true on New Year's Day dinners. Within the African American community, collard greens is served with black-eyed peas and hog fat on New Year's Day and promises to bring good luck and financial reward. Hanging a fresh collard green leaf on your door is said to ward off evil spirits, and a fresh leaf placed on your forehead promises to cure a headache. During the Jim Crow period, many restaurants would not serve African Americans, and this led to them relying on home-cooked meals or food from Black-owned restaurants, creating what we now know as soul food. This kind of cuisine was filled with affordable, nutrient-rich ingredients like collard greens, cornbread, sweet potatoes, and pork. As it was a comfort food, it created a sense of community during tough times. Soul food became an integral part of the African American experience. Soul food also played a vital role in church gatherings in the Black community and helped spread the popularity of collard greens across the country. As a result of the awareness and appreciation, restaurants began to serve soul food classics like collard greens, pushing these flavors from niche family meals into the mainstream. During the Great Migration, numerous African Americans relocated from the agrarian South into more industrialized northern and western cities in pursuit of better jobs and a better quality of life. Amidst this unfamiliar territory and this new urban lifestyle came ready-made meals, but these African Americans carried with them their Southern traditions. Their culinary practice of eating and consuming collard greens made their way to their new homes and provided them with a nostalgic connection back to their Southern roots. It was like having a piece of Southern tradition in a new, unfamiliar place. During the Civil Rights Movement, food played an important part and went far beyond just keeping people fed. Soul food suppers, which served collard greens, were a significant part of the African American community, and they served two important roles. Firstly, they raised money for the Civil Rights Movement. Secondly, these food traditions kept a sense of culture and heritage alive during a stressful, challenging period. Adrian Miller, the author of Soul Food as a Culinary Creation, explains how food was able to create a strong sense of belonging. Dishes like collard greens and fried chicken helped create a unified African American identity and was critical to the success of the Civil Rights Movement. However, some people did see collard greens in a negative light. They viewed them as a symbol of hardship and as a bitter history of enslavement. A number of educated African Americans thought that soul food, which included collard greens, was not healthy or nearly polished enough. They tried to distance themselves from the traditional food and aimed to adopt what they viewed as a more elevated eating habits. Despite this, during the Black Power movement in the early 70s, the opinion of these foods changed once again, as foods like collard greens were now being looked on as a form of protest against oppression. These foods were a way of celebrating African American culture and racial pride, despite the continual attempts to hold back and erase the African American historical experience. Views on collard greens have evolved a lot since the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power movement. And even though the reputation of soul food being unhealthy has lingered, changes have started to happen in how these foods are being made. For example, traditional dishes like collard greens have begun to be slow cooked with healthier ingredients and less salt, and other methods like sauteing and stir frying were being used to try to keep the tradition alive while being considered more healthy. Today, collard greens have gained popularity due to their increasingly health-conscious individuals. They provide a high amount of vitamins A, C, and K, and fiber, as well as other minerals. Because of these beneficial nutrients, the African American community in particular has started to recognize the healthiness of collard greens and try to highlight the nutrient-rich nature of the greens to shake off the negative opinion that surrounds soul food as a whole. Collard greens are an essential part of soul food. It's a type of cuisine that originates directly from African American roots. From the Night Watch, which is an event that remembers the Emancipation Proclamation, to casual get-togethers, family gatherings, and other traditional holidays, collard greens continue to signify a symbol of African American history and heritage.
So this time I did not let y'all catch me, did not let you catch me, because I don't have collard greens, but I got some getting the family. I got some spinach right here. I did not let y'all catch me eating the spinach that I got. And that Chef Kevin McPherson was the one who did the spinach salad. Salmon and spinach, because you know seafood is a part of our cuisine. Seafood is part of our cuisine, African tradition. That's what we engage in. And so I was listening to it, and that's why we're moving on down. And so what we're going to do, we're going to take another break. This is Run Tell That. We're moving on down. We're about to get into some other things too with regards to our food, our tradition, our culture. So we're going to take this break. We'll be right back. This is Run Tell That. I apologize. You caught me this time with some macaroni. Somebody said macaroni and cheese. We just said macaroni. You know that. Macaroni. And just like, you know, some of y'all say, well, wait a minute. Collard greens is tied to Europe. Yes, but they come to the continent. And y'all heard him go and say about Sukuma Wiki. That my people in Uganda, my people, you know, in Kenya. We know what time it is because, again, the Columbian Exchange. So it becomes intimately tied to us, and then we also bring that rhythm and that rhyme right here to the South. So again, foodways, and so macaroni. Again, got that African component tied to it, that African handiwork, you know, that African lineage tied into it. Again, black folks. tied into this right here.
Why do black folks love macaroni and cheese? Macaroni and cheese is one of the recipes that shaped American food culture. It has a rich history that dates all the way back to ancient Greece, but it's within the African American community where it's found a special status. Macaroni is a dried, molded pasta traditionally made from wheat flour and water. Its origins back to ancient Greece. The term macaroni comes from the Greek word for maker, meaning blessed. The pasta became an integral part of the Mediterranean diet and subsequently permeated this way through Greek, Roman, and Arabic cultures. However, the inclusion of cheese into the equation did not come into the existence much later in Europe. First known recipes for a macaroni and pasta type dish was de lasagne, which required layering sheets of pasta with cheese and spices. It can be found in one of the oldest Middle-aged cookbooks called The Form of Curry, which was compiled by cooks of England's King Richard II in the 14th century. However, a more recognizable form of the dish originated in Italy, where certain types of pastas and cheese in a casserole were documented all the way back to the 13th century Italian cookbook called the Liber de Cucina. But macaroni and cheese, as we know it, was introduced to the Americas by Thomas Jefferson, but he didn't cook the dish himself. During his tenure as an envoy in France, Thomas Jefferson enjoyed a similar type pasta dish in France, and he commissioned his enslaved black cook by the name of James Hemings to learn how to make it. James Hemings was the older brother of Sally Hemings, who was also the half-brother of Jefferson's deceased wife. In 1784, when Hemings was just 19 years old, he traveled with Jefferson and his daughter to Paris. In Paris, James trained under different French chefs. Over the next 5 years, he became a master of French cooking and got particularly good at cooking macaroni pie. This was a creamy pasta dish that eventually turned into what we know as macaroni and cheese. The recipe involved using whatever cheese he had on hand, layering it in between buttered macaroni mixed with milk. He would then cook it in a Dutch oven, which he placed over a fireplace, and hot coals would be placed over the lid to bake the macaroni and cheese. Even though Hemings' crucial contribution to cooking and he was famous as a chef, he remained relatively unknown. This was because he was still enslaved under Thomas Jefferson until 1796, and he was one of only 2 slaves that Jefferson set free, and that was only under the condition that James would teach his younger brother Peter to take over in his place as Jefferson's cook of the household. Peter Hemings would then serve the dish at a state dinner in 1802, making it famous. Unfortunately for James, he would pass away at 36 in 1801, but Hemings' most important impact on American food culture was his introduction, macaroni and cheese. Adrian Miller, who is the author of Black Smoke, African Americans in the United States of Barbecue, explains about Hemings that his story is a metaphor for African American cooking and our experience in this country. It's the story of innovation and virtuosity. Often African American cooks get overlooked for our contributions and our accomplishments. In the early 19th century, the dish we call macaroni and cheese was primarily a food of the elite. This was because dried macaroni was not commonly accessible and Americans didn't know how to make good quality pasta. In addition to this, Italian cheeses, which was a key ingredient in macaroni and cheese, was too expensive for most Americans. As the century progressed, the Industrial Revolution dramatically changed the accessibility and the popularity of mac and cheese in the United States. The production process in making macaroni and cheese became more affordable and more widely available, made it more popular with the lower classes. The establishment of the first cheese factories in this country amplified the production of cheddar cheese, which soon became the common ingredient in macaroni and cheese, thus making the meal even more suitable for poor communities. It was during this time we also see macaroni and cheese lose its Italian and French origins and become a more crucial part of Western cooking. For the African American community, after emancipation, the dish bore 2 distinct identities and varied in significance. One was a quick side dish for weekdays, and the other was a more elaborate meal celebrated for Sunday suppers. It was during this time period that macaroni and cheese evolved in the South among African American communities and became what we know as baked macaroni and cheese. This dish was also based in hard times when the Black community desired to dress up their macaroni and cheese, thus began a tradition of baking layers of macaroni and cheese. During the Great Migration, where African Americans moved from the South to northern industrial centers, this continued to spread in the popularity of macaroni and cheese, thus making it a well-known dish within the Black community across the United States. Additionally, it was Black women, first the enslaved, then later domestic workers, that were instrumental in the dish's trajectory. Their cooking skills and knowledge greatly impacted how this dish had evolved, reinforcing the role of Black women in shaping American cuisine. With macaroni and cheese becoming a common dish among Black families, it began to reflect the craft and ingenuity of these Black women. Its importance within the culture was so high that sometimes a family member's approval was needed before it could be cooked for special occasions. In 1918, there was a Swiss invention that changed the food industry forever. It was processed cheese. Over the years, this innovation led to products we recognize even today, such as Kraft Singles, Easy Cheese, powdered sauce that comes in the mac and cheese box, and of course, Velveeta. This is when macaroni and cheese really took off. In 1937, Kraft launched its boxed macaroni and cheese. It was a cost-effective meal choice in one simple box. Priced at only 19 cents, it could feed a family of 4. Consumers responded strongly to the reliable, affordable meal option, and in just 1 year, Kraft sold 8 million boxes of boxed macaroni and cheese. During World War II, food rationing and tightened domestic spending, this made Kraft boxed macaroni and cheese even more appreciated as a food staple. Shoppers found that they could purchase 2 boxes of macaroni and cheese with only 1 food stamp. It was during these years that boxed macaroni and cheese earned its reputation as American treasured comfort food. Macaroni and cheese became a reflection of the United States with its convenient packaging and industrialization. It was the ideal American food. Pasta and processed cheese that were very cheap to make, it was easy to ship and store, and it was very filling. While African American families did opt for this cheaper, easier to make meal, they didn't relinquish the tradition of preparing baked macaroni and cheese from scratch for special occasions. Macaroni and cheese continued to be an essential part of family gatherings and special meals in the Black community, particularly during the holidays such as Thanksgiving and Christmas. It was considered more than an everyday comfort food. It was an integral part of celebratory feasts and cherished symbolic representation of the community cohesion. While there are many ways to prepare this dish, there was a standardization of the recipe that happened in Black kitchens in the 50s when it was referred to as soul mac and cheese. This consisted of macaroni, a substantial portion of cheese, butter, milk, often topped with breadcrumbs or cheese, which is baked to achieve a golden crust. During the 60s, mac and cheese became an even more integral part of the community. It was a symbol of the community's strength and unity. During this time of the Civil Rights Movement, mac and cheese was a common dish at gatherings and meetings, and women who were referred to as movement mothers handed down coveted recipes and their techniques, and mac and cheese became to symbolize more than comfort food. It stood as an emblem of community strength, unity, and resistance in the face of racial inequalities and systemic prejudices. That tradition continues today, with mac and cheese still being a significant part of Black cultural cuisine. Its ceremonial presence during the holidays and family gatherings and religious events, it goes beyond just a hearty pasta to a cultural icon that has ingrained itself in our shared history and identity. Despite the stereotypes and stigma that continue to categorize mac and cheese as an unhealthy soul food, mac and cheese continues to evolve in Black kitchens. Chefs keep adding their own twists to the classic recipe while respecting its historical importance. They continue to reinvent this comfort food and inserting their own personal.
So I'll share this with you. My daughter does this excellent jalapeno macaroni. Again, you know, they're mac and cheese, but she does an excellent jalapeno that she throw in the jalapenos. Again, you know, she throw it and the owl peppers. If it's from fish peppers and all that, she put that in there. So my daughter does an excellent job. That's why we say that twist, that's what goes on. And so this is a twist too. Now, during this time period in December, for many people, what happened, People like talk about the gifts, and people get caught into the games and the trinkets and all this other stuff for many of their children and many of their family members. Guess what? Some people, guess what they got during this time period right here? They got fruits. They got grapefruits. They got oranges. They got fruits during this time period, right? This is what they got. And so I look at people today when some of us scream and holler and say we got to make sure we got a good time period, for our children, because again, we got to give them all these other gifts. But for some people, what they got were fruits. Yes, that's a part of our story. They gave them fruits during this time period. And this time period I was going to get into, I thought we were going to have a little bit more time, but instead, December 25th was important to us because that's a holiday that our people celebrated in the northern part of the Gullah Geechee area called John Canoe. Some people hear John Canoe, they think BAM in the Caribbean. John Canoe done also right here in this part of the country. John Canoe.
Once a year, after all the harvest was gathered, after all the chores were done, they were allowed one day of freedom. And they chose John Canoe, that grand parade led by the fancy man in his tall hat and fancy clothes, followed by the rag man in his costume of many colors, each rag representing his ancestry and the movement of freedom as they went from town to town and door to door. And after each performance, they would go up to the door, knock on that door, and the master himself would come out and drop a coin in his old tin cup. John Canoe, can't you hear the drums? Can't you hear?
Now, with regard to the John Canoe celebration, I'm going to put this up, again, you look at it. John Canoe was celebrated on Christmas Day, December 25th. For African people, they were not concerned about Christmas, but John Canoe. John Canoe was also tied to liberation, tied to satire, because again, and the Goombay boss, people talk the Goombay, people say Africa did not remain with us. Yes, Africa lived with us. And so with regard to that, under John Canoe, we saw that celebration. We heard the people that you had Harriet Jacobs and others go and talk about what will go on, that again, that everybody rose up on the morning of this Christmas Day for the John Canoe. And with regard to the John Canoe, when I talk about satire, that's what happened. That Africa is now out of the entire year. That was the one day that they could not make a mockery of Caucasians, the people who held them in captivity, the people who had oppressed them. That was the day. And so people used that. They had outfits. They had outfits on that, again, they had pieces of cloth that represent those family members that were lost. John Canoe was a celebration that was done here in the northern part of the Gullah Geechee area, and is tied to, again, our tradition, our foodways, tied to the festive times. And so, again, we have Aunt Giving, G.I. May, we have John Canoe, we have Watch Night, we have IET Haiti's Independence Day, and then again, some go on with regards to New Year's Day, but then also Kwanzaa. So we're going to end with regards to this. This has been Run Tell That. We say share all our shows on Our Black Media, and we say to you all, check out all our shows and support us in Hot 2100 Savannah, our digital radio station. This again, we'll see you all next week.
Like that.